Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We have an absolute cracker to get into. Carlos Alcaraz versus Holger Rune for the Wimbledon quarterfinals. And I tell you what, this is uncharted territory for both players. We're going to get into it. Arguably the two brightest talents in tennis right now. Yannick Sinner might have something to say about that, to be fair. He's on the other half of the draw and he's doing his thing. He's already guaranteed his spot in the semi-finals. For Alcaraz and Rune, they're looking to also book a place in the semi-finals and really make a run for the Wimbledon title. Before we get into it though, remember that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening to a podcast platform. Shout out to our members as well. You guys are legends. We will be doing a live watch along for this, so do tune in for that as well tomorrow. Okay, let's break this down then. So, why is this such an interesting and exciting matchup? Well, Alcaraz has already won the US Open. For Holger Rune, he's won some really important titles, Masters 1000 titles, like Paris, for example, last year, where he actually beat Carlos Alcaraz. The head-to-head is 1-1, and that Paris win that Holger Rune has over Alcaraz was a set victory, but then a retirement for Alcaraz. Alcaraz beat him in the next gen finals in 2021 in straight sets in that interesting format where it's first to four. Pretty comprehensive victory as well. Both victories, however, for Rune and Alcaraz, both on hard court, so maybe not the best indicator of how this match might play out. However, it's worth noting that both these players are very inexperienced on grass. Holger Rune hasn't had a lot of experience on grass, neither has Alcaraz. Both players are in the teens, if you will, of matches played on grass. I definitely know that Carlos Alcaraz is anyway, because he hasn't played a lot of tennis on grass. But Holger Rune, he has also tried his best anyway to try and, well, get as much grass court practice as possible. His game's very different to Alcaraz. Alcaraz, very attacking, always looking to be on the front foot. Holger Rune does have some attacking abilities, but really it's his defensive abilities that really sets him apart. His shot tolerance as well, and also his willingness to come forward to the net, which both these guys have. So we're going to break that down in more detail in a second, but what I'm going to do is divide this video into three sections, and we're going to try and keep it as succinct as possible. First of all, we're going to talk about their route to this stage, who they've played against, and how they've looked. Then we're going to talk about the head-to-head very briefly, and what that might mean, I guess, going forward. And then finally, we're going to talk about it more from a strategic and technical standpoint. So how are these guys going to play in their first ever Wimbledon quarterfinal, and what might happen when they clash? Now, interestingly, by the way, grass, he has a 3-4 record, Rune. So he actually has a losing record on grass so far. He's only played 7 matches on grass, which is absolutely insane to think about. And he's made the quarterfinals here. So, look, I mean, fair play to him. And I don't know if is that right. Does that sound right? I don't know if that does sound right, to be honest with you. But look, I mean, no. So this doesn't include Wimbledon. This doesn't include Wimbledon. So it would be he's won a few more matches. So he's over 10 matches now, and he's got a positive record. So okay, so exactly what my estimate was when I initially said it. So that's still very inexperienced. Both these guys have played under 20 matches anyway on grass, which is just nothing, right? Absolutely nothing. And it'll be interesting to see what that means in this match, because both players will have some sort of nerves playing on centre court. Holger Rune, he's playing on centre court against Alcaraz, who's going to be the favourite as well. So mentally, there's going to be some sort of battle there as well. But Holger Rune seems to have very strong mentality, and it's probably fair to say that so does Alcaraz as well. Both players quite mentally strong, and that's a really positive thing, I think, for this matchup. And hopefully we see the best tennis from both these guys, because they are and have been historically very mentally tough. Okay, let's very briefly go into their run to the quarterfinals. So for Carlos Alcaraz, well, he's played some really good players, and I think when we did the draw for him, when I did the draw preview and prediction video, I was thinking from round one onwards, generally or genuinely even, I thought that he could lose any single one of these matches. Instead, he's come out pretty impressively. We'll talk about the last two matches because those are the most impressive ones. Shardy straight set victory, same with Muller as well. But the Nicholas Jarry one, he was really tested. He was massive server, massive hitter. And he pushed Alcaraz all the way, not to 5 sets, but definitely physically and mentally. I think in some of those sets, probably could have done a little bit better and taken Alcaraz to 5. But in the end, Alcaraz victorious in 4 sets. Similarly against Berrettini, a similar mold of a player, but he played incredible tennis against Alexander Zverev in this previous match. And he also came up short against Alcaraz, losing in 4 sets. And Alcaraz, I mean, he played some really good tennis, including a 104 mile per hour rocket forehand. I mean, it was really a big, big hitting affair. And both guys were hammering their forehands, and it was definitely a pleasure to watch. For Holger Rune, well, a few interesting matches here, and we'll talk about that in a second. Lofhagen straight sets, Carlos Bena straight sets, so no issues there. But then Davidovich Fokina, that's where it gets interesting because he had to fight really hard in a final set tiebreaker against the Spaniard, and he was 2 sets 1 down as well. He recovered beautifully. Also against Dimitrov, he lost the first set, but then came back nicely, winning 2 tiebreakers. And he came up clutch, to be fair, then winning the 4th set in the end as well. So, look, up here, those tiebreak victories, especially against Dimitrov and then Davidovich Fokina, that final set tiebreaker, he's going to be thinking, you know what? I can win from any position right now. He's got that type of mentality. He's a fighter. He really is. And I think that's what makes this matchup so intriguing because even if Alcaraz is take the first set or the next set, Holger Rune is going to fight till the end. And he might lose in straight sets, for example, but he's going to fight. He's going to do everything in his power to fight. And I've seen very few really, really flat performances from him. And when they have been flat, it's normally because he's fatigued. And so I'm hoping that his body is okay because at Roland Garros, when he played that marathon match against Rundalo in the next round against Rude, he looked very flat. He did his best, like he fought in spurts, but he just didn't look the same. Uh, but the positive is that I think actually form-wise, in terms of the level that he's brought to Wimbledon, it's arguably actually higher than Roland Garros, which is ironic because clay is his best surface, I think. So maybe there's not as much expectation on him as well. A lot of people, including myself, thought that he'd go very deep at Roland Garros, but at Wimbledon didn't have the same expectation. But now it's look, he's sneaking in, and now it's really crunch time because Alcaraz is one of the favourites, of course, and a lot of people will pick him to either make the final or potentially even win. If they're not picking Djokovic, that is. And yeah, I mean, Holger Rune is probably not top 3 favourites for the title. You would imagine anyway. So in terms of the head-to-head, so you can see here the 2 matches. Alcaraz winning in straight sets in the next gen finals, and then that victory in Paris where Alcaraz had to retire after losing the first set. So we're not going to touch upon that really because there's no need to. Let's talk about it for a technical standpoint. So what do both these players bring to the table on the grass? How's the match going to play out potentially? So for Carlos Alcaraz, look, I mean, if you don't know what he brings to the table, then he might have been living under a rock potentially. But on grass, especially, his attacking game is suited to the surface. His attacking instincts are suited to the surface. He's bulked up his serve. He's breaking the 130 mile per hour mark quite consistently. When he hits his spot, it's a real weapon. Of course, he's winning 3 points. He's also willing to come and serve and volley. He's got great hands in the net, good transition game. And he normally backs it up really well with normally a fantastic +1 forehand, which we know he can really, really hit through the court with. One thing I think he has also been trying to do is flatten out a little bit on the grass court. He's got enough power so he knows that if needed, he can drop down the pace a little bit and hit with more topspin, but he knows that depth is important. And one thing that actually Amy Lundy pointed out on Twitter, which I think is a really good point he did against Berrettini, who's a big server. Holger Rune, not as big, but still can be a very solid server, is take a leaf out of Djokovic's playbook, which is rather than maybe going hard down the line or cross court and maybe not getting that depth needed on return and then leaving himself a bit open to the +1 shot of his opponent, what he's been doing is taking a little bit of pace off the ball at times of that return, but going deep down the middle. Now, if you go deep down the middle effectively and accurately and within half a meter within the baseline, your opponent's not going to be able to attack that ball with huge amount of venom unless you're lobbing the ball up in the air. Then fine, they might have a lot of time. But if he's just taking a little bit off, but he's getting it deep into court, just inside the baseline, at the feet of the opponent, if not even a little bit inside the court, your opponent cannot attack that ball without taking massive, massive risks. And it's a high risk play that most players will not attempt to go for. Holger Rune will not go for that either. And what it does is, it might not necessarily always put you on the front foot, but it will damn sure get you to neutral. And Alcaraz has been willing to say, okay, maybe this is a trade off I need because I have a less time on the grass courts where I'm not able to maybe take as big a swing as I'd like. And I'm not maybe able to set up my forehand or my backhand return with the same amount of ferocity, finding angles. And maybe that's going to make me susceptible to getting hurt on return. So that was really interesting and a great point from Amy Lundy. So I'll go and check out her Twitter and also 3 Tennis podcast as well. She's been on the channel multiple times. On top of that, and we talked about his return as well, of course, in his serve. We know his forehand is a killer. His backhand, though, because it's generally quite flat and he finds good angles, is quite effective on the grass. His slice has been improved. I still don't think it's an elite slice. I still think there's room for improvement, but it's definitely a work in progress. And his movement on grass has improved just because he's played more matches. So he's just more used to moving on it. He's not going to slide on it like he admittedly said that he wouldn't, like a Djokovic or maybe even a Sinner, but he's looking at maybe a Murray or Federer and seeing how they move on it effectively and trying to replicate that. And his movement's been good defensively as well. We know that he can make you play the extra shot 2-3 at times because he's got the hustle in him and he's got the incredible athleticism. And also his anticipation is good as well. It really is. And I think that's something that needs to be mentioned because not everyone mentions it, and anticipation is crucial at this level. For Holger Rune, we know that his serve, again, he's bolted up, definitely. He's breaking the 130 mile per hour mark at times as well. I would argue that his serve maybe isn't quite as developed, maybe as Alcaraz's. But when it's on song, and it can be a little bit inconsistent, then it is definitely a weapon. I'm also very impressed with his willingness to come forward and transition and volley, and I think he's got really good hands at the net. We didn't mention Alcaraz's drop shot and lob. We'll come on to that a bit more when we talk about more, I guess, both players gelling together. But Alcaraz's backhand is a very good weapon on his flat. It soaks up pace. It's very, very effective. The forehand can be a little bit loopy for me at times, a bit too clay-like, can be a bit short, leaves him open. And Alcaraz with his footwork is going to hit a forehand against that forehand of Rune's, and that's when Rune could get hurt. So Rune needs to be careful there. But the serve, needs to hit his spots against Alcaraz, no doubt, and needs to try and get as many shorter returns as possible and get on the front foot, because on the back foot, even though he's a great defender, against Alcaraz, he may have potentially met his match when it comes to defending from the back of the court. Although I think you could probably argue that his shot tolerance is better, but on a quick court like Wimbledon with low bounce, you don't want to be engaging in grueling long rallies, because for the most part, that means that you're not just hustling, but you're hustling in a very weak position in the point. In terms of the return, Holger Rune is a very, very natural returner, similar to Alcaraz, but I would argue that actually maybe even a bit more natural. I really like how he returns. I like the short take back. I like the fact that he's willing to return different ways. And for the most part, he is very, very effective. So I think what we're going to see is two players who, yes, they can get through their service games well. And because it's a quicker court, we're going to see some easy holds. But both players are definitely capable of breaking the other. And that might make it a very tasty match, because we see a lot of matches, and we have seen a lot of matches at Wimbledon where there's not many breaks of serve, there are a lot of tiebreakers. There could be a tiebreaker, but that could have entailed a couple of breaks either side or against either player even. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a really good battle. I don't necessarily see anyone being massively dominant over the other when it comes to serve and return dynamics, in all honesty. I think when it comes down to it, it's more the shots after that. And I actually think the first strike for serve or return is relatively equal, I would say. You could argue that Alcaraz maybe edges it slightly, But Holger is not too far behind. So when it comes to the forehand to forehand, I think Holger is just going to be very solid with his depth. He shouldn't be trying to out hit Alcaraz, let Alcaraz try and make a mistake by trying to go for too much on a deep forehand cross. And potentially he needs to be the one that takes the impetus though going line first. And Holger Rune can do that. I think he's going to be careful about going really high and heavy because it's not a grass court. If he does that against some players on grass, he'll get away with it. Against Alcaraz, he will use his feet, he'll get around it, he'll hit a massive into our forehand, and it'll hurt you. And even as good a defender as Holger Rune is, you can only take so much punishment and you can only defend so well. Backhand to backhand, Rune has actually got a really decent chance of being able to win points though. His backhand, in my opinion, is a lot more trustworthy than Alcaraz's. I think it soaks up pressure more and pace, and I think his slice is just as good as Alcaraz, if not potentially better. But where it gets interesting is that the reason why I'm saying also the reason I also say that I don't want Rune to be defending a lot, and he shouldn't be defending a lot, is because if he does, what does that leave him susceptible to? You guessed it, the Alcaraz drop shot. And to be fair, Rune also has a good drop shot. Maybe not quite as good, but it's up there. It is up there. Now, Alcaraz does also want to be really far behind the baseline. So that's going to be the key, and I think the goal for both players is to really get on the front foot, push each other back, find good angles, and make sure that they're playing their game so that they can hit the drop shot, they can come forward in transition, come to the net. Both players really good at the net, which I love, and I'm looking forward to those net exchanges and also seeing how each player tries to pass the other. Alcaraz will hit the lob a lot. He's got a fantastic lob. Rune is great at the passing shots as well, as is Alcaraz, especially on the run. And Rune's got a good lob as well. So these guys have great varied skills and they're very inexperienced on grass, but that's what makes this matchup so exciting. And I hope that's coming through in my voice because I'm trying to stay calm rather than super excited because then I go completely off on one. So, in terms of prediction and how I think this might play out, I think it's going to be a tight one. I really do. I could easily see it going to 5 sets. And that might be brave to say because a lot of you might be saying, well, Alcaraz should be winning easily. I'm not quite sure if that's the case, in all honesty. And I think Rune has shown that he's very capable on grass. What I would say is that Alcaraz hasn't played anyone like Rune yet, really. He's played two big serving, big hitting players that haven't had the same athleticism as Rune, who can match him physically. If Rune is at his best physically, this is a really tight match. For Rune as well, of course, he hasn't played anyone of the same ilk as Alcaraz. Dimitrov, you could say, okay, forehand wise, he's kind of up there with Alcaraz, you could argue, but he hasn't had anyone with the same skill set as Alcaraz. But Alcaraz is very dynamic, so I'm going to go for Alcaraz in 5 sets. It's a pretty big call, and the issue is if he was to play 5 sets, it could really hurt him in the semis or final, and same for obviously Rune if he was to go through. But I just have a feeling this is going to be a really tough match for both players. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you on the next video. I cannot wait for this. Make sure you guys tune in for the live watch along.